welcome. Hi, good evening. Thank you for coming to the Arts Council's spoken word event tonight. Just before we get started, we wanted to thank a couple of folks. Walter and Edie Holland, Jim and Re Johnston, John and Xochitl Koppelmeyer, Bill and Cindy Pitts, the law offices of Dustin McCrary, L. Gordon Iron and Metal, S&J Carolina Scale, Statesville Jewelry and Loan, Minette Cloud Services, Julia Wilson and Rob Collier, Jane Getsinger, Abigail Jennings, Richard and Jen Griggs, Brian and Amy Howard, Casey Vanhoy, Wendy and Tommy Allison, Michelle Hepler and David Lingle, and then Sir Speedy and Owen Graffix. We want to thank them for sponsoring this venue and for the Arts Council. Our next shows coming up, tonight's is the June 10th spoken word show and event. On July 1st, we have Leah Shaw. September 9th, we have Caleb Cottle. And on October 28th, we have Randall Bramlett. So we wanted to get started by talking a little bit about our sponsors and about thanking them and thanking the people who perform. Speaking of which, if you're interested in what happens tonight with spoken word or written word or poetry, and you want to get involved, contact John Koppelmeyer at Iredell Council of Arts or Iredell Arts Council. And if you want to get plugged in, just let him know. So we're going to get started, and since I'm an MC for tonight, my name is Samuel J. Fox. I'm a Statesville native, and I've got a couple chat books out, and I do spoken word. Tonight I'm going to read off the page because I'm also a paralegal, and it's hard to have time to memorize things. It's hard to memorize things, especially your own work, because you're so critical of it sometimes. So I'm going to get started reading a little bit here. I'm going to read 4 poems, and I hope you enjoy them. So this one is for a friend of mine who has become a friend recently. It's dedicated to Adam. It's titled, "There's a Lot More to Adulting Than Growing Up, My Dude." And I want to tell him that, my best friend, who is 3 years younger but dating women 10 years older than himself. I want to say something like being in an unreciprocal relationship is like being a buoy on the shore, or something along the lines of the only person in this world that can make you truly understand happiness is the person you see every morning in the mirror, no matter how bedraggled. But we can't say that because we're dudes, which I think is ridiculous. There are boundaries invisible across every space in our lives, borders that prohibit us from speaking or acting in various irregularities. I used to think that it was obscene and prolifically appalling, but now in my 30s, I see it as a necessary evil. We can't unmask the monsters ourselves. They must do that for us. Now he sits next to me and we stuff tacos into our mouths, and he asks me what he did wrong. Why doesn't she love me? And for the first time in a long time, I think of how not breathing is a lot like choking on darkness, or how not speaking when asked is a lot like forfeiting your own existence. So I tell him, you try too hard to earn something unearnable. It is hard to love someone who won't let you. And part of growing up is learning when to let certain people leave. My dude looks at me like I just materialized a halo above my head. He looks at me as though my third eye has just opened upon my face. He looks at me as though for the first time, realizing what I am to him. The world blurs. Nameless people on the street lose their faces. He standing and I sitting take drags on Marlboros that slowly kill us. Why anyone would want to love under particular conditions is beyond me, but I will anyway. Because love isn't something without parameters, but its sky goes all the way up and beyond. We all reach for the stars, even though we know we'll never hold one, some with less effort, some with more. But regardless, it's the trying the hardest trial we will ever face is growing into ourselves, inevitably blooming, yes, blooming into a universe made flesh. This next poem, yeah, you can clap. This is not one of those. Please clap. Please snap. Please, if you hear something you like, definitely. This is not. We want audience representation too. We want you to react to the poem because it is an intangible thing until it's put on the paper, and then you want to explain it to people. But sometimes it's the feeling, and if you feel something, feel free to express yourselves if you like something. This next poem is an ode to one of my favorite musicians. His name's Chris Cornell. He was in a lot of bands that I admire, rock bands. And this is called Ode to Chris Cornell, beginning with total darkness and ending with a gasoline-soaked guitar. The black sky with hardly a moon looms over this town like a coroner, holding a sliver of light like a scalpel, and it is my birthday. And in 17 more days will be a day that the past 4 years, every single time, I will sit like a stone in the open field behind my house and attempt to start a fire using a poem that I've written 100 times on my flesh and on paper. I too have been a slave to using. I too have watched my friends sink their teeth into something that instead chews them up and regurgitates their body. And we are left to clean them, put makeup on their eyes and face, and pour their favorite liquor on the dirt above them. And still, this year I will have lived to see 30 years of sunlight. And I am honestly shocked at the way I still take for granted my own flesh when I remember a time when a noose was just as appealing. And I too have been a slave to music, however, letting it fill my lungs and muscles like blood or air, like God possessed my ears and said, "Boy, you'd better move as though you won't again." And I do every time. May 18th will become holy for me, for God so loved the world but couldn't bear the silence of our shame. He pressed dirt in between his fingernails, spat some phrase about grunge and redemption, blew on his hands, and then you sang, flailed and belted us with metal-studded leather voice, and called us to a communion of bobbing heads and thrashing. Tonight, I will sacrifice this broken instrument I have neglected and failed to fix, and place it as a metaphor for my jagged-edged life. I soak it in streams of gasoline, like this poem I've written for as long as I've been able to repent, while the fire begins to play its music one last time. And I've been writing a lot of odes to artists that I love, and I feel like that's a part of, art, having communication with other people in your art, whether it's across a genre or not. So this is an ode to love, ending with a line written by Prince. I thought I understood the breadth of a wound, but like an iceberg, cold and deep. I walked around it with it just above my sternum. I've heard you truly know hunger when you feel it in your throat. Like a singing that burns the song and singes the vocalist. I'm learning I've been starving for the indescribable my whole entirety. Thus, the poems began. I perch over memories like a messenger before the parcel is tied. Love rhymes with dove, yes, but it's not nearly as white and focal. All the lovers before this point, and even the one now, have been butchered by their own or someone else's hands. The world works like this. We are all pieces of damaged verse written as flesh on the notation of our landscape. We complete some giant work, though we are alone, are too small to read it. We talk about straight lines from point A to point B. We haven't reached the second point yet. Ergo, a line is not the fastest way. Some days I float through my life haunting the same old portions I've allotted myself. This is the mountain on which we kissed. This is the coffee shop where we whispered promises over espresso stream. This is the room where I took you in my mouth and you grafted your name on my tongue over the previous. These days I can believe that sometimes it snows in April, and other times brimstones fall over Christmas. I guess love is only love if you believe it. I never have been able to believe in anything but three things. That if you are here already, you become a decent human being or become tragedy. That if you believe in anything, believe in dreams even if they never come true. And if you dream of anything, dream of desire, and then shape it into a gift to give away. Make it into your life. When your wound never heals, when your hunger never subsides, when your dove never returns with a response, found with its perfect pitch of red on the arrow sung by sadness, remember, a love isn't a love until it's past. So I'm going to go ahead and step off the mic. I'm going to introduce our next poet for this evening. He is a local Statesvillian. He has written a new book, has a book of poems out, and he is, I think, partnered with another one of our poets tonight. I'm going to introduce, come up to the stage, Les Brown.
Hi. Got to put his socks on.
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear me? So the socks are not too thick. I would like to mention that I do have a little book of poetry published, my first book that I've ever had published. Kind of interesting, thank you. The kind of interesting thing about it is that it came out the very day that everything shut down for coronavirus. So I had several readings planned, all that sort of thing. So this is my first public thing with the book. And I'll read one little poem from it. But first of all, a couple of other things that are more recent poems. This one is called Purr. Anyone who has cats or likes cats will associate with this. A cat whose breath is silent is a silent drum, vibrating, speaks a language from the feline soul that eases into the heart, voices of truth, beyond measure, not political, not sacred, not erudite, a retention of wildness. We hear the rhythm, assign meaning, accept the cyclic beat, words of contentment. We touch, the cat responds, as cats have since the pharaohs caressed them in temples. Understanding seems simple. We assume that cats love, want to be stroked, live in our shelters, where we do their bidding, not knowing the mystery of the feline mind. We're cat lovers. And this one is, I was a biologist, so naturally you're going to wind up with a few animals here. This is about moles in the yard. It's called Backyard Conundrum. Moles with their fossorial feet, tiny eyes, down soft fur, and piggy nose have tunneled around my raised bed garden, beneath wiry Bermuda sod, on into my lawn, raising a maze of soft, writhing ridges, occupants unseen by cat and hawk. They dig and dine in darkness. Worm and grub fear their sharp teeth and super sense of smell. My mother stood in the garden, watching, statue still, hoe in hand, watching for heaving earth, where moles made their way among her vegetable roots, ripping them in search of spineless fare, aerating earth, loosening the soil, helping vegetables grow, killing others, until her arching arm and blade swung down, ending the conundrum. I will allow the moles in my yard to run beneath my feet, increase their maze, annoy my neighbors' sense of aesthetic lawns, to find pests that chew the flowers and fruit. I stand and watch the earth at the tunnel's end for motion, think of the creatures living below, content I walk away, leave them safe from talon, claw, and hoe. Thank you. This one's not about an animal. This is about my mother. It's called Just One Camel. I caught my mama smoking there in front of her cook stove. Straight-laced daughter of a godly Baptist woman who obeyed every commandment and added even a few. Thou shalt not smoke, thou shalt not drink, thou shalt not fornicate. Mama's world-wise sister put her up to it, gave her one of her camels, only one, never another. After she saw me seeing her sinning right there in her kitchen, she opened the eye of that stove and threw that camel right into the fire and brimstone. Thank you. Let's see, I'll read one little one from my book, and this, let's see. This one's called Plowing. It has a little double meaning. I grew up in the years of the Vietnam draft, and I was passed over for the draft because of my vision. Thank goodness, I guess. But I've always felt a little sense of kind of strangeness that I didn't accompany my fellow classmates on that strange adventure. It's called Plowing. Hambone needed someone to plow his rocky garden since A.G. had gone to Vietnam, leaving his father and Dory to worry and keep on living. So I drove Dad's farm-all cub 4 miles up the highway to the burned-out, stubbled plot. Because I wore thick glasses, I could only see the world like a flat photo. I stayed behind while my classmates flew planes hundreds of miles and dropped bombs that scorched and ripped open the earth of worried fathers and mothers. Okay. Not so funny. Okay. I guess I'll, one more? Yeah. No more? Okay. Well, okay, this is a little lighter note. This is my family celebrates Christmas in the mountains. Illegal fireworks ordered from Black Cat, shipped to our neighborhood depot master by rail, pierced Christmas Eve night at the edge of the field. Aerial bombs screamed skyward, bursting earth in trembling explosions, spectrums of color. Dynamite roared from pine boughs on the hill above the grain-stubbled fields, heralding the imminent birth of baby Jesus. Whiskey bought sheriff rides by slowly, his head out the window, looking heavenward. The law passed to protect us from ourselves, to protect the mountains from conflagration, went unheeded in our secluded valley of hardened farmers and roaming youth. Okay. Thank you very much.
Give it up one more time for Les Brown. Next, would you please put your hands together for our next poet? And I might misspell your name, or I might mispronounce your name, but I know you as Nadia Sunshine. So Miss Nadia Sunshine.
Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Good, good, good. Okay, I honestly don't know where to start. I don't do a lot of spoken word events. I usually just kind of write my thoughts and keep them. But today I decided I would, step out and do something different. So here we go. In case you're wondering why I've shifted you in this direction, it's because I'm attempting to make a distinction between who I am and who you need me to be. I'm an artist. My craft consists of using every tool in my box to create. My medium is life. I like to allow the natural forces of the universe to guide me to my assignments. I take heed to alignments. I'm an educator. I teach the things that I've learned. No associates, no bachelors, no masters, just God, gut, grit, and experiences earned. I advocate for the things I want, like for everyone to be successful, not by a social standard of the term, but by however they define it. I'm the cloth that's been cut too many times to cover others, and to most I may seem abstract. But don't get distracted by the comprehension that you're lacking. Just know that I'm perfectly exact. And with that, I call this one poetic and alphabetic. I feel anointed yet annoyed, blessed, sometimes belittled, creative and crazy, delivered and delusional, enlightened and exhausted, faithful yet frustrated, graceful and grim, hallelujah and hell no, inspired and ignorant, joyous and jilted, kingdom, but sometimes I feel a little kicked out, loved yet laughed at, motivated but mocked, nirvana and negative, optimistic, but oppressed, praised and paused, queen but quack, royal and a little rundown, saved but set up, talented and torn apart, unique but underrated, victorious and victimized, winner and wild woman, XOXO and X'd out, young and yawned, zealous and apathetic. Basically, poetically alphabetic. Okay. Those are my more like on the surface, just kind of thinking of words and putting them together based on how I feel, And then every once in a while you get to this place where it's like you have like a thought, So, I sit and think, trying to remember to blink slower, lower my response to the stimuli inside me, the anxiety that rides me, consciously playing hide and seek with myself, trying to manifest wealth and good health. Demons got me trying to master my stealth and stamina, 'cause I be damned if a bitch give up her plans for the applause from a society that don't accept or respect my piety. They gunning for my sobriety because I won't go quietly. I'm highly opposed to chains around my brain. The clinking, it drives me insane. Let's be blunt, or smoke one, before they give you a pill to choke on. And sometimes, we have to look deep within ourselves and just like be really, really honest. And sometimes when we can't be honest with ourselves, it helps to have a friend that kind of just like hold you accountable and say, yo, no. So this one is called Guilt is the House That Jack Built. It's kind of after a little nursery rhyme, a little play on words, But a foundation of firm lies and silent night cries. Weeping never heard, rights turned wrong, the feeling is absurd. You did what you wanted and you got what you got. Back then you felt hot and untouchable. You had it all put together, like a Lunchable. Then the tables turned and it puzzled you. These are not the things that you were told would come to you. He didn't do what you were told he was supposed to do. But for fear of being alone, you held him close to you. But all the sweet promises he sold to you, back then he was bold to you. Now he's grown and the games have gotten old to you. Y'all done been through so much, done seen and felt it all. In spite of the pain, you refuse to fall. Scared to trip, don't want to drop the ball. Despite your best efforts, that's exactly what you did. You let him lie, cheat, and beat you. And then you went and had his kids. Tried to escape, thought you could run off and be with friends, but they don't exist. So you cease and desist, too scared to cut your own wrist, unsure how much more you can handle of this. The pills you tried didn't work because you survived. Now you're thinking of a million ways to die, trying to avoid this being the one. You got boys, so you can't lead them to guns. So think about, what is it you've really done? You're so young. Your life has only just begun. To be honest, this song is tired of being sung. Time to change the records, put in some new tracks. There's a million ways to die, but there's also a million ways to get your life back. Hey, there's a million ways to forget about Jack. This is your house. Take his name off the lease. He can leave in peace or he could leave with the police. Time to clean up, baby girl. Get ready to do some chores, because this is the house that you built, and that guilt is not yours. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Saifah, Nadia, Sunshine. So next coming up, our next poet is Steve Shoemaker. He's a local poet and pastor, and he has 8 books published, and I want you to give it up for him. His name's Steve Shoemaker. Give it up.
It's an honor to be here with these remarkable people here tonight. Let's see if I can do this without a pulpit to protect me. Part of my calling as a minister is to bring theological meaning to the public square, what some call public theology. What I will do with you tonight comes out of that, both some poems, but mostly prose. On this past Good Friday, April 2, I stood right outside the old county jail here and recorded a meditation called The Cross and the Hanging Tree. For tonight, a new piece, The Hanging Tree and the Monument. Outside this old county jail, near an old tree, stood a gallows for public hangings. The Iredell Arts Council is redeeming this space. In the lynching era in America, 1880 to 1940, over 5,000 black persons were lynched. Lynchings were one part carnival and one part revival service. Christian hymns like The Old Rugged Cross were sung. Sometimes thousands gathered to watch the spectacle of hate. Parents brought their children. Photographers were there to take pictures and sell them as souvenirs. In one part of the South, there was a lynching every 4 days. These extra-legal killings were sanctioned by a culture of white supremacy. They still are. The slayings of Ahmaud Arbery, James Floyd, and Breonna Taylor have reminded us this year of the expendability of black bodies in America. Tragically, the white church has contributed to the culture of white supremacy. In Robert Jones' book, White Too Long, he documents his careful and comprehensive research that finds that the single greatest determiner of having racialized attitudes in America is whether you identify as a white Christian, more than age or income or where you live. The white church in America has been an incubator of white supremacy. Most of the people hanged at this place in public execution were black persons. In 1878, a black man was executed accused of raping a white woman. On the gallows, he exclaimed, "I am innocent of this charge." The last public hanging here was 25 years later, 1903. He was also a black man, accused of killing a white woman who lived near Cool Springs. His arrest, trial, conviction, and hanging happened over a 24-hour period. When this man was hanged, raucous crowds gathered in the street and from rooftops and buildings nearby to watch. The crowd tore down the curtain that was put up to hide him while he died, so they could watch him die. In the Jim Crow era, the two most prominent symbols of white supremacy were the lynching tree and the Confederate monument. Over 1,000 Confederate monuments were erected across the nation in about the same time period as ours in Iredell County, 1906. Many of them, as ours, were placed in front of county courthouses. For decade after decade, black persons had to walk past a Confederate monument to enter a courthouse of unequal justice. It is a true act of human reverence to honor the dead. But this monument is not just an honoring of the dead who fought for the Confederacy. It is also a defense of the Confederacy itself. Inscribed on one side are the words, "They bore a flag of a nation's trust and fell in a cause, though lost, still just." This is why it is important for our community that the Confederate statue memorial be relocated. And it is why the Clergy for Healing and Justice, a group of which I'm a part, has joined as a plaintiff with the NAACP and other citizens in a lawsuit against the county and hope that it will be relocated. Standing here in the center of our city, it has caused and still causes anguish to people of color and great moral discomfort to many others, regardless of the color of their skin. William Faulkner famously said, "The past is not dead, it's not even past." in this day of resurgence of white supremacy and Confederate revival, let's work together to make this part of our past more past. The second portion is a poem I wrote entitled, "A Preacher Amid Consternation Wrestles with Benediction." May the powers that be become the powers that were. May the isms that oppress, racism, sexism, classism, nationalism, and the like, become wasms. May the corporate behemoths grow small enough to serve somebody beside themselves. May fewer churches be nonprofit organizations, and profit is spelled P-R-O-P-H-E-T. May the science deniers founder in their ignorance. May the meek of the earth, the ones who love it, save it from the plunderers. May we see again in full measure a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. May the medically uninsured be reassured by a nation that starts giving a damn for the sick and dying. May the politicians lose their way long enough to regain their sight of the common good and the meaning of public service. May our human mania to be separate and superior be purged from race, religion, and nation, and maybe even our human little hearts. May our neighborhoods become neighborly and our social media sociable. May our misbelief that might makes right be turned, even by pain, into trust that right makes might. May we learn to live simpler for the sake of the lives of others and the earth. And may we be poor enough in spirit, knowing our need of God and one another, that we may become friends of the poor and neighbors of all. May America's Holy Trinity, money, greed, and power, with all its incorporated subsidiaries, be replaced by God's Trinity, justice, compassion, and peace. And may the benedictions of this fitful preacher be cleansed of all malediction, that these words be turned to praise of you, O God, maker and lover of all things, big and small, that our crooked world be made straight again, and all the world made one. We might call that poem a poem of protest. We need the poetry of protest, such as the poet of the Harlem Renaissance, Langston Hughes, and his amazing poem, Let America Be America Again. We should read it every July 4th. But we also need the poetry of praise. Poet Denise Levertov writes, "A passionate love of life must be quickened if we are to find the energy to stop the accelerating tumble toward annihilation." So here's one little one-sentence love poem. Sue and I celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary last week. The poem is entitled, "A 3rd Wedding Anniversary at 73. The 73 refers to me. Sue was in group 5 waiting for the COVID vaccination. So here's the poem, "A Wedding Anniversary at 73. There is a God." But here's a real poem by Mark Strand that Sue and I love. I read it for her and for you tonight. It's called The Coming of Light. Even this late it happens. The coming of love, the coming of light. You wake up and the candles are lit as if by themselves. Stars gather, dreams pour out of your pillows, sending up warm bouquets of air. Even this late, the bones of the body shine, and tomorrow's dust flames into breath. My last piece is entitled Pride Month and the Unhindered Gospel. I wrote it for Baptist Press Global. It's a little more in church than the other pieces. One of the key words in the book of Acts in the New Testament is the word unhindered. The last word of the book was the adjective form, saying that Paul, near the end of his life, preached the gospel of the kingdom unhinderedly. The whole book is about the gospel going out, despite all obstacles and opposition, throughout the world unhinderedly. Acts 10 is a case in point. Peter is in the process of being converted again. As one has said, it takes a lifetime of conversions to become the new creation God made us to be. In this episode of his life, Peter is being converted from a religion of exclusion to the gospel of inclusion. The issue was the full inclusion of Gentiles into the church. A vision on a rooftop, and the Spirit of God led him to the house of Cornelius, a Gentile, to preach to the Gentiles there. It could not have happened a day earlier in his life. Right in the middle of the sermon, the Holy Spirit interrupted him. I hate it when that happens. The Spirit came and fell on everybody in the household. His Jewish friends who had come along expressed astonishment that the Holy Spirit had been poured out even upon the Gentiles! ! And Peter, calling for baptismal waters, said, "If then God gave them the same gift that he gave us when we believed in the Lord Jesus Christ, who was I to hinder God?" The church today is experiencing a joyous Pentecost of churches who are welcoming LGBTQ people into the congregations. They are seeing the rich spiritual gifts our gay brothers and sisters are giving the church. Of course, gay people have been giving their amazing spiritual gifts to the church all along. Only we did not recognize them as gay persons and fully welcome them. Thus we created in them a dividedness of self. Their soul truth had to be split off from their public selves. And now LGBTQ people are expressing their truest gifts more freely in the body of Christ, unhinderedly. A few years ago, I was asked to go visit an older man in the hospital who was near death. He was gay, and he had no pastor. We talked for a little bit, and then he said some of the most honest words I have ever heard as a pastor. He said, "When I die, I just as soon that be the end of it." He had been so injured, I surmised, by the hatred and rejection he met in church and heard from the pulpit, he could not imagine heaven as a place he wanted to end up in. We talked a little more. I said, if there is a world to come, and who of us can know for sure, I believed in the God beyond the God he had been taught, and that this God would joyously welcome him home. I prayed a blessing and left. I felt like crying. How many millions of LGBTQ people have lived bereft of church and full of a sexual shame imposed on them by the church through the years? A shame that attacked them at the level of their personhood. In 2007, Myers Park Baptist Church in Charlotte, where I was the pastor at the time, was ousted from the North Carolina Baptist State Convention because we fully welcomed LGBTQ persons. The vote on the convention floor was 2,985 for the ousting and about 20 against. I did not ask for a recount. The next day, the morning headline of the Charlotte Observer announced in huge letters, "Expelled," with a story underneath. I received hundreds of letters of gratitude about what we had done. One letter was from South Africa. This white man had a decade earlier formed a loving partnership with a black gay man. Because of the repressive laws at that time of apartheid, they risked imprisonment to do so. They were also involved in the anti-apartheid movement. His beloved partner was shot dead in 1993, a year before the victory over apartheid was won. He wrote to tell me of the gratitude he felt and how grateful gay people would be around the world because of our action. He closed saying that the particular road we had chosen to walk would be littered with obstacles, but was a road, in his words, well lit by a light that is not of this earth. So that, he said, our footsteps not falter or stumble. I can almost hear the words, not be hindered. The acceptance of LGBTQ people into the church is not only letting us receive their enormous gifts, it may help heal our souls, shamed in so many ways by shame-based religion. They are teaching us authenticity and the hard road to it. How can we not welcome them without hindering God? Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Steve Shoemaker. Next up to the stage is a poet that I'm close to, and I love her work, or their work, is Shane Manier. Shane Manier is also known as Riot with a nonprofit organization called the Guerrilla Poets. You should ask her about it. They're doing great things in Charlotte and the Kannapolis area. Please give a round of applause for Shane Manier.
Hey, y'all. So I was getting ready to feature in Charlotte once, and it was at Blumenthal. And if anybody knows the Blumenthal, it's a pretty big deal. That's that's right, I'm featuring at the Blumenthal. That's right, poetry at the Blumenthal. I'm featuring, and I was all excited about it. And I was telling this friend at the time, right? or else there wouldn't be a poem about it, right? I was telling him at the time, I was like, yeah, I'm excited about my feature. And this man goes, well, I don't see what the big deal is. It's just poetry. It's just words. And I, right, exactly, clutch the pearls, right? And I had some choice words for him, but I didn't say them. Instead, I wrote this poem. Listen, man, my dad was drunk outside the Mayflower restaurant the night he knelt down and placed his hand on my shoulder when I was 7. And he pointed up to a crescent moon with a star next to a steeple, and he said, look, remember this. And then he staggered off to the car. And y'all, he left me in the parking lot. So I stared and stared until my eyes fell backwards into my face, became black holes, and sucked the moon out of the sky. Y'all, my dad taught me how to see, how to listen, that there is poetry in every instance, taught me to interpret the forgotten languages. When I was 8, he deemed our poem Invictus, wrote it on the back of his toolbox in black, and we would recite it over and over down long roads. Y'all, my dad taught me about long roads, taught me when you are fluent in the tongue of the world, you must also know control. Taught me what it means to be a poet. When I was 5, no lie, a snake bit him, and I watched this man bend down, grab it by both hands, and bite that snake in half. My dad taught me how to hold the devil in my mouth, how to spit him back out, how to swallow sin and speak deliverance. Taught me this life will wiggle. You got to grab it by both ends. Now that he's dead, I tell the stars themselves, look, remember this. Every time a poem supernovas at the black hole of my pen, because I may be the vessel, but I am still the captain of the ship, and God may move through me, but I move the God in them. And stagger off into the crowd, but they lay hands on me like butterfly pins. This becomes reversed revival. The moment my foot leaves the stage, I am the one now led to slaughter. You become the savior. So clear a path so my blood could Jordan its way to Jesus, spitting a stiff stanza to be a staff of Moses, with me rocking and a rolling on the waters of my passion, because I still to this day got all of Noah's wilderness stampeding around in the ark of my rib. You call me lion, call me pigeon, call me shepherd, call me a crescent moon threatening a star at saber point, holding the entire night for ransom. By dawn you will bear all your nakedness, a strip in each sentence. Tell me that ain't powerful. So the next time a poet says, look, you better be paying attention. I love doing that poem. It makes me feel so good. Thanks, Dad. He would constantly do that. He'd be like, look at that over there. And he'd just walk off, and I'd be like, what am I looking at? I get it now. Thanks. Leave me out there for hours. He's probably in there laughing with Mom. Like, what is Shane doing in the yard? Don't worry about it. Recently, we did a poetry program through the nonprofit Guerrilla Poets for Tent City residents in Charlotte. And we were all excited because, because of the pandemic, a lot of people lost their homes, and gentrification that's also happening in Charlotte. And the city stepped in and was like, hey, we're gonna put them up in housing. We were like, great. Well, we went to where they put them. I can't legally tell you where they put them, but let's just say I'm not happy with the city, nor is a lot of other people. And it was heartbreaking. And so this is a poem about that and just that whole experience. So, Departure. At the Jack in the Box, I cry, choke down cold French fries, and taste only the hot salt of my tears, while a rabbit that has followed my car hops up to the driver's side window as if to ask, are you okay? Gate. The road to Tent City is a Rubicon of zombies, bodies laid across a broken down car, writhing like a tide of poison, sunshine fire, fool's gold pulsing through veins, starbursts exploding in their palms, Skittles spilling from pocket holes. Hopscotch across the junkie needles and turn left to gate 2, where 2 cops high as skyscrapers guard what sells. One of them tells you to check in at the door that looks like a knocked out tooth. Here you are presented with a choice. Do you trust the man with blood bucking around the black puddles of his eyes, or drive around the back to arrive? Arrival. Prison blue doors slapped against a gray box. A man goes out one door for another and sings, got you a haircut, got you a haircut, yeah, yeah. There is no one to meet us at the white tent that stands like a forgotten revival where the poetry events are supposed to take place. I think about revivals, how poetry is supposed to save. I think about how it's not going to be enough for any of us, not today. A woman pulls in the representative with bedroom eyes like two vacuums of Valium to tell us how tired she is. And yet none of the tenants will leave their rooms. They eye us from their balconies like hidden things in holes too deep to reach into. Suddenly, a boy appears like Jesus, floating across the concrete to greet us, all black hoodie holy. I can hear his stomach rumbling like Old Testament churches crumbling, and the woman is upset, wants to know what happened to his hair, his beautiful hair. He tells her he didn't want them to, but they cut it. Introduces himself as Lucky, and she scoffs. Lucky, is it? Well, I'll honor it if that's what he wants. But he had a name, a beautiful name, Israel. His face becomes a tower of Babel falling, a pillar of salt looking back at a bastard city, and his shoulders collapse, everything in his eyes falling, a nation he cannot burden by himself. I watch him throw down his birthright, throw down his name, too heavy, too much, too little, too late for today. He won't look us in the face. He is hungry and clearly afraid, too afraid to leave the guarded gate, to walk across the street to eat. So she offers to take him, and we tell him the useless sermon of poetry. Crash. 2 minutes away from the river of zombies and the gray gave maw of building with its toothless doors, I come to a stop sign in a manicured neighborhood. 3 white boys on scooters play in the street laughing, and one makes direct eye contact with me. My face becomes a tower of Babel falling, and I scream into my rear view, how safe you must be, before my heart spills to salt across the dashboard. Jet lag. When I get home, the night wraps so tight around my throat that I too cannot breathe, and my womb claws itself barren in fear for all of our children. My feet frantically aware of the empty space before the concrete claps against my soles, while the rabbits in the yard watch me with eyes wide, deep in their holes. And then this poem was about, I don't know if y'all know this as well, but there was an arts tax that was trying to be passed in Charlotte where it would be like tons of money for the art community there, and it didn't get passed, and that's okay, you know, like we're innovators, that's what we do. You're like, give us $1, we'll make an art show out of it, like, you know, we'll put a flashlight on it and do some shadow play or something, you know, we'll make some stuff work. That's not what was so upsetting, and even that alone, that's a whole nother poem about the fact that wasn't even surprising that it didn't pass, right? But the upsetting thing was, of course, like, number 1 rule of the internet, don't read the comments. And what I do, I click, and I, oh no. So I read the comments, and this was the poem that resulted from that, because just seeing like the complete denial of how important the arts are, so. I also teach at a lockdown facility, so I work with teens that have extreme behavioral health challenges, and so this is a lot about like what they go through and why, like, I truly believe the arts, they do save, you know. Right. America, Your kids can have a paintbrush or a gun in their hands, you decide. Though I suggest you think twice, considering the world you've left them to play in is filled with the nooses of your loose ends, colleges who see their students as blood banks for tuition they can't pay, a housing market that only houses rich lineage, and all your generational trauma from thinking being American means you gotta be Ford tough. Talking like, get this switch and don't say shit. See how it bleeds on down the line in the bully. Teachers keep saying how each generation gets more violent younger. Or your slander for the cries for help. Talking about your Great Depression taught you how to suffer in silence. The great gaping hole that reaped your fields and cupboards now reaps the minds of your sons and daughters. A Great Depression of the modern day. Or your stories of the Cold War era. How being afraid in America meant hiding under your desks from the Russians. America, your children still hide under their desks, but now from each other. So much anger they don't know where to aim, but one day they may. One day they may. I've seen the violence ripple through them, like your flag, stripes of red bleeding all over itself, the blue of bruises beaten inward, the folds of fists frayed at their grip, just trying to fight for a reason to live. And I've seen paint. I've seen paint smooth over the canyon of creases that circumstance has ripped through them. I've seen how each stroke on a canvas helps them process what's been done to them, helps them plan what's next. Learn how to climb one line at a time to their own freedom. I've seen poetry grant more forgiveness and revenge than any bullet could blast. I've seen them write themselves out of your trauma and dare to dream for a better tomorrow, then spread it to others. I've seen how art has not just saved their lives, but the lives of every citizen who don't know how close they are to an uprising of despair and rage. Every man and woman who's forgotten what was left after they stopped caring about the world around them on the day they figured they'd finally made it or settled into their complacency, forgot that they too are powerful enough to change the course of America, to hand it off to the next generation and then blame them for the outcome. I've seen that result come in the form of a barrel of a gun pressed against a boy's chest like it was his cross, like it was his birthright to die in these streets you built, to remind you of the first America, the Wild West. I've heard a child's stomach growl, belly of the beast loud, till the only thing I could hear was the hollow promise echoing through a cracked Liberty Bell. I've seen a girl refuse to trust any kind word from an adult, damned herself ugly, then painted herself beautiful enough times to finally believe it. America, your children can carry a coffin or a canvas, a switchblade or stanzas, a suicide note or a scholarship, a death threat or a dream, a way to heal or a way to bleed, your pride or your shame, the result of your support or the cost of your blame, your better future or your fail for all. America, it's your call. I'm going to do another one that's fun for me. It's got a lot of Greek references. I don't know. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google it and enjoy the ride. Basically, the whole point of the poem is if you're going to hit them, okay? So whatever you do, just go all in. But, like, you know, as long as it's, like, don't actually, like, hit, you know what I mean, okay? Just full heart into whatever you're doing, all right? That's the whole point. Okay. If you want to sling rocks at giants, make sure there is a volcano in your sling. Sling fire high enough to make the degrees sing sign language to deaf angels. Wake the sky up so you can wake up before you grow gills and adapt to whatever pressure gauge you're being held in. Whatever that's towering over you with its gravel knuckles scraping your spine, crack your back up straight and heave your armor downward. You don't need it now. It will never be as courageous as the nerve endings of your own skin. You can take it. This I promise. So split every stitched orifice, Orpheus. Your Eurydice's death is in every lover's eye, where the iris is the river that is running out of time. So you take her hand in the pupil's pulpit and bring us all back to life. There aren't strings strong enough to hold the notes, so you break them till it snaps the vocal cords in your throat, and bring the stone to mortar mache knees. Use it to build a kingdom with no king. If you want to sling rocks at giants, make sure there is a volcano in your sling. When they ask you about the molten mornings, tell them it is where you wake and sleep. Tell them you've only known cold, but when it burns and your insides carry the temperature of 1,000 suns, the scale everyone likes to mention but has never touched. So touch them, tell them to touch you, get really close to your own hands, write about them, spread them, use them like antennas, like eyes, so you can find where the cold creeps in, to fill every four-coast house with light, to bring the angels home to roost, rip off the roof of your fear. You don't need it now, not here. You've already got all the answers to the questions you're afraid to ask, and how they tower like giants with their chains at half-mast. Put them to rest, bleed verses so tight it can slice through golden calves. If they are a monument of hard cash, honey, you gotta be the diamond in the rough that never washes the dirt from its cuts. If you want to sling rocks at giants, make sure there is a volcano in your sling. Honey, sling fire and wake the sky up to sing. Thanks, y'all.
Give it up one more time for Shane Manier, guys. All right. Next up to the stage, we have Kevin Mills Jr. Everybody give it up for Kevin Mills Jr.
How's everybody doing? I'm always excited to share here. My goal here is to connect with everybody in this room. So I'm going to take this opportunity to let everybody know. I go by a stage name, and it is Jot Pilgrim. And everybody, if I connect with you, if you hear anything you like tonight, any questions, comments, or concerns, I want you to reach out to me across all social media platforms. It's going to be Jot, J-O-T-T, Pilgrim, the word Pilgrim. And thank you again. Appreciate it, Iredell Arts Council. The first poem I'm going to share with you is called The Obituary. And a lot of my poems, they just start with a realization, a fact that grabs me, and I write a poem about it. So this first one is called The Obituary. They're using his high school cap and gown picture for his obituary. He commenced in June, sat with an academic advisor last week, but he'll never be marked present come fall. He never made it through the summer. Gunned down at some block party, a cookout, a corner store. They're using his high school cap and gown picture for his obituary. The photographer managed to capture optimism. The glow in his eyes signified that he understood he reached a milestone. But there are enough milestones to write a eulogy for the young. In the photo, he is unaware of what's to come, but I look at it knowing what's to come as if the Grim Reaper has been cropped out. They're using his high school cap and gown picture for the obituary. Survived by parents with nest eggs, college funds for futures that never come, they sheltered him, kept him busy. Only black homeowners on the block, his dad a regional FedEx supervisor, although the neighbors assumed he must be involved in the record business. I struggle celebrating birthdays. I can't stop thinking about how old Keith would have been, how old Corey, Kareem, or Damon would have been. I think I expected my last birthday to be my last. I don't think candle visuals and memorials should be this familiar. I don't think a young man should be this focused on death. Shouldn't have to designate dresser space for rest in peace t-shirts. My late friend's mother visits me often. I am her proxy son. We both suffer from a survivor guilt that makes our bond stronger. In years to come, I'll post a picture of my son fresh out of preschool in his cap and gown. It will warm her heart to see how responsible and grown I've become, but the sting of never being a grandparent lingers. The yearning to know what a conversation with the 30-year-old version of her son would sound like. So I speak to you, often by the name she named you. For her, this is your memorial, like the high school cap and gown picture they used for your obituary. Our pictures were next to each other in the yearbook, our paths identical, products of our environment with dreams that reach far beyond our block. And you made dreaming easy. Made fantasies of finding an escape route as fun as watching you run routes. We all tried keeping up, but you had an athletic nature. Said if you'd make it, we all make it. Even if you had to carry us, we'd finish because you were our anchor, but your life was snuffed out prematurely. At 19 years old, they're retiring your jersey at the high school. And your mom, still your best friend, has to choose a picture for your obituary. There's a MySpace profile picture, and you in all your glory, in your high school cap and gown. And she'll pick the latter. Because if Webster made a new edition today, they'd have to use your cap and gown picture next to the entry for hopeful. So, they're using your high school cap and gown picture for your obituary. Thank you. This next poem is just called Uniform. And again, just like I said, life happens, you realize something, I choose to write about it. Jot pilgrim, get it? Kind of like pilgrimage, and you jot about it. So, yeah. Here we go, uniform. My freshman year of high school, I spent a lot of time in Newark Liberty International Airport, flying back and forth from New Jersey to Minnesota. There was this one time standing at baggage claim, there was a military man, Navy, dressed in his service blues. And the other jet-lagged passengers standing anxiously for their belongings to arrive without knowing anything about the man showed reverence that only a United States military uniform could garner. They parted, created a pathway, so the soldier had prime position to snatch his duffel off the conveyor once it began to move. They thanked him for his contribution, for the sacrifices he made for our liberties, and if he'd been wearing blue jeans and a t-shirt, he'd be jockeying for position like the passenger I wrestled with for armrest access. Or like me, standing in the background, terrified of mobs and anxious in lines. He wore that uniform as if he knew he'd need privilege. Then I thought about my uniform, a deep mahogany complexion I could never swap out for dress whites or service khakis. Ironically, if I worked hard enough to earn his uniform, some people would still see my skin before my Purple Heart, see my tattoos before my badge. I still wear them proudly, my tattoos, medals of honor. I too have seen the trenches, got it out the mud like a jungle infantry. What decal signifies that I belong to a diaspora, scattered, and no matter what I wear, I can't swap out skin on laundry day. Dark-skinned and donned in stigma, I dressed for the occasion, left my hoodies at home as not to startle the neighbors. I've seen the power attached to uniforms abused, and I've seen the uniformed abused. Watch the same man that littered in front of the custodian hold the door for a pilot. Seen a service worker at Hardee's fight for her dignity. The custom isn't always right. And I've come to loathe certain uniforms. No matter how much I'm conditioned, though, I never loathe mine. Mine comes in with a built-in crown and access to energy that governs the universe. I can manipulate space and time with a declaration. I am decorated. Like that Navy officer I observed at baggage claim. This uniform, a throwback to the original man inspired to create feats science still can't explain. Could I wear this uniform and aspire to become poet laureate? Because as of late, the majority of brothers uniformed like me wind up in a cage. Maybe it's time we stop loving men in uniforms until we actually get to know the man in the uniform. Maybe we should lead with love. I've seen a documentary on DNA, and honestly, after a certain point in the double helix, we all pretty much have on the same thing. Uniforms. Uniforms. Graciously bestowed upon us, my comrades in the human experience. Teamwork makes the dream work. Thank you. Okay. All right, I got, why do you hate me? When I've been taught to envy you? Were there no African gods as handsome as Adonis or Apollo? Taught to covet your privilege, traded in Cuban links for power ties, a coarse crown for a manageable wash and go, took ebonics out of my lexicon. And low key, I was more validated when a group of young white friends decided to inform me that I sound white. More validated than any time I spent in the trap. More validated than any time I spent behind bars. Validation that I am nobody's nigger. Sad paradox. You hate me. Looking down on me from a pedestal I built. Every time I joke about how dark you were, how good hair came with fair skin, how good options came with fair circumstances, how good credit came with a distinguished middle-aged white man. Why do you hate me? I need you to relate to me. Did you cry when your grandmother passed? I did. Smile at your child's first steps? I did. I am flesh facing the exact same threat as you. I am not black, you are not blue, because the universe palette is infinite. Why does my hue stroke you the wrong way? Cried on deaf ears for years. He's just carrying on about inequality. No, he's carrying on about upholds of stagnant educational systems, a reimagined inclusive American dream, and a criminal justice reform. Because, not the old jailhouse, but there are some new jailhouses that are into some shady shit. And I have long given up on trying to figure out why someone could hate you, label you insignificant, ignore your contributions and write you off as the plague, wince at your wave, and immediately deem the encounter as not safe. I've had police called on me, delivering Amazon packages in an Amazon van, dressed in an Amazon uniform. And the officer told me that he got a call that a strange black man was in the neighborhood. Why do you hate me? My goal is to show you how alike we are, how at any given moment you're surrounded by more descendants of immigrants and indentured servants than any descendants of Confederate generals. And even though parts of your heritage are built on seeing mine as inferior, I still respect you. Still respect how the invention of the cotton gin helped birth the industrial age. I respect the contributions of agriculture, how you created a space where you can live off your land. Why do you hate me? I've been practicing my non-offensive greeting for all my white neighbors. I swear I've heard whispers of, there goes the neighborhood, when really this gated community is screaming for diversity, screaming for flavor, screaming raisins don't go in potato salad. Y'all gotta stop hating. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, have a good one.
Give it up one more time for Kevin Mills Jr., everyone. Finally got it. That's very great. Woo! I need an applause for that because I've been nervous about that all night. Now we have the next Brown coming up is Joyce Brown. She was the wife of Les Brown. She has 2 books. Please give a round of applause for Joyce Brown.
I have to ask myself, why did I get this position, the very last one, after all of this aura that has just built up in this room? And I guess the great organizers, in their wisdom, thought that you needed a calming, older, perhaps somewhat doddering influence to enable you to calm down and quietly go back to your normal lives. Okay, so I do have another set of poems I wish I had brought, but we'll try that for another time. Instead, I'm going to take you to the past. Sorry, but the past, what did you give me your Faulkner quote? The past isn't just the past, it's the present, or something to that effect. Yes. Well, this is one of my grandmother poems. I was brought up in this area, very Iredell County, as you know, stuck in 1957, but this is even before then. It was a country county. It was a farming country, and we see it moved. My grandmother was a country farming woman. My cousin gave me a letter that she had written in 1935 to a friend who had lost her husband. And in it she says, I'll get just a little bit of that, Molly, I know there is a black cloud over you, but I hope it will pass away soon. But I know it is one of the hardest trials ever anyone had to pass, when we have to look to higher power to help us pass them by. And I pronounced those words somewhat oddly, because if you could see this sheet, you would see that my grandmother spelled I know, I-N-O. Black, B-L-A-C-K-E. Over, O-V-R. Trials, T-R-Y-E-L-S. Ever only one, anyone, O-N-E-Y. Because my grandmother came from dirt poor farm country, and this is a poem about her education or the lack thereof. That hard-swept yard was where she had learned. Her mother took the Bible in her hand, passed it round for them to share, made them sound the words, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. The heavens declare the glory. Those Presbyterian songs they'd sing in church gave her heart's ease and taught her her letters. She'd learned enough to change the letters into sounds, but the words her mother's stick scratched into the dirt blew away too quick, smeared by running babies, erased by her father's footsteps, bidding her to come to the field and hoe the corn. Thank you. You didn't have, I wasn't waiting for that. I was just taking a breath. You know. We've looked a lot at the past and how changes have occurred to people from living on their self-subsistent farms and moving. Statesville was a mill town. Troutman, where I'm from, was a mill town. Marion, where my husband is in my husband's county, was a mill town. And what happened, of course, when the trains, especially, when the railroad tracks got laid through the mountains of North Carolina, all those hills, those curves back and forth, but they were built there so that men could haul coal and so that men could haul trees, dead trees, cut the forest down, and eventually so that they could bring industry and could lure those poor mountain people who could hardly survive on their scraps of land into the town to work at the mills. Some of you may have known about mill villages. Some of you may have seen mill villages. That was the lure, to go from the farm to the mill village. And this is my poem about the train trying to pull them away from their own land into the mills. The Clinchfield sang siren songs to the mountain dwellers in 1910. While they were sleeping in their cold, hard rooms, the train thundered, shook them away from fields, holes, mules, bellowed, "Come on, come on, come on, we'll give you money, a house, a church, and you can work shifts, and then go to bed, go to bed, go to bed. Rest easy, easy, down in Marion Town." Thank you. Okay. I guess when you're old, maybe you get a little shallow or you look around desperately for what you can write about. So I saw some guys in the McDonald's. This was pre-coronavirus. Guys in the McDonald's, in all of their paraphernalia, their camo, enjoying a little coffee break. That they were talking about hunting. Hunters on coffee break. An accident happened, the kind we fear when our mothers get out our baby pictures. The kind that makes us blush when we bump into a clattering "keep silent" sign in a church, or somehow start to sing when everybody else has stopped. He was hunkered down, neck sunk deep into camo back, camo cap, low over his brows, muttering across a table scattered with fries and camo canvas elbows, shifting his mud-crusted leather boots, telling his buddy a story, suddenly leaning forward, forgetting that some law of good old guy physics commands that even with the best Walls or Walmart or Cabela's camo, we're still in danger of showing our asses. We have new neighbors, and you know you always wonder how that's going to work. We're great animal lovers, but there's one dog that hasn't made the cut for us. The neighbors come with a big dog. He is not a good dog, this dark, shaggy German Shepherd with his long tail and hunter's eyes. He growls a stream of dog obscenities between his sharp, bass dark barks. Somewhere he lost his doggy soul. Maybe some master stole it, or maybe he was never gifted with that lassie light that we loved. Poor boy, I wish I could change him, this canine child of darkness, a one-headed Cerberus come to light in my neighbor's yard. Okay. I'm sorry, I really have written deep, profoundly wise stuff worthy of my years. I just didn't remember to bring them tonight. Okay, this is one more poem about one of the mountain people that we've been acquainted with up around my husband's territory. It's called Anticipation. Virgil keeps 2 photos in his trailer, one his wife, the other his girlfriend. He swaps them out if he knows they're coming. And if he doesn't, he just won't let them in till he has the right woman upright and dusted. Thank you.
Give it up one more time for Joyce Brown, everyone. And that concludes our lineup for the evening. We want to thank the Iredell Arts Council for allowing us to be here, and for anyone out there that's interested in joining an event like this next time, please reach out to John Koppelmeyer. And I hope you all have a good evening. And I guess we're going to linger and do what poets do and talk. So thank you, guys.